Good morning, everybody, here at the Slovenian Digital Center in Ljubljana and also online. I would like to welcome you to the fourth day of the EU Blockchain Week. Our fourth day will be focused on blockchain and AI for the European Green Deal. As you all already know, the SDGs are a set of 17 global objectives which are focused on sustainable development issues ranging from equality, education, climate change, infrastructure, land and water, production and consumption, with a target date of 2030. Blockchain can be also applied with respect to our SDGs in some various ways. First, by providing all actors, roles and participants in general with a layer of traceability and global transparency, which promotes the behavior and responsible use of resources in all kinds. Second, by offering resilience and security capabilities, which hinder any kind of unilateral manipulation that may harm third parties. And thirdly, by guaranteeing the precision in the surveillance of actions through the use of smart contracts, which validate the actions that occur within blockchain. So, by this short introduction, I would like to announce our first panel of today and the fifth panel in general of our EU Blockchain Week, which will be focused on blockchain and AI for SDGs. And with this, I would like to invite Mr. Marko Grobelnik from the Jožef Stefan Institute to open our panel with his keynote speech. Mr. Grobelnik, welcome.
Hello, everybody. So my talk is on AI, right? And the point, so I won't talk much about blockchain itself. I will touch SDGs just briefly. Some of the key messages which I try to make is, first, what is AI, right? From the formal point of view, so this means the definition, and then later we will check a little bit how AI evolves in an evidence-based way. So I will present the project we have with OECD, and this is the so-called OECD AI Observatory. Okay, let's go first to so name of the game, right? Definition of AI. So this kind of disputable topic across all AI and even less AI researchers. What is AI, right? So let's first check what is not AI. You see here a cat, right? Mimicking a machine, right? So this is exactly opposite of what we try to do in AI. In AI, we try to build systems where machines would mimic people, right? So here is the opposite. Okay, now let's go to the actual definition, right? In the history, there were plenty of definitions of AI, typically short ones by more or less famous authors. And a few years ago, so like 3 years ago, I was appointed as head of the working group for defining AI in OECD. And it was kind of interesting task. So the point was to construct not a fun definition, not a definition which would complain or just focus one aspect of AI, but something which would actually hold for a longer time and which would capture pretty much everything what AI is today or what it aims to be. So out of this, so here's the list of definitions, but we selected one which seemed like relevant as a basis for our work. So this Winston's definition from his book, 92, which includes this feedback loop type of systems. Okay, Later, after 8 months of work, we came up with these 3 sentences, right? So this was like, I said, 8 months of work, was quite a group of people, long discussions, and even like 10 minutes before the actual vote, whether the definition will be adopted by 44 countries or not, we were still changing these 3 sentences. So I just want to point out that this is quite a disputable topic. So not to read these 3 sentences, I will show this on the next slide on the picture. Basically, we try to tell that still human is in the loop. The loop is about observing, about modeling, and acting, right? So these are 3 key elements, and there are several levels of autonomy which we should be concerned about. And so this particular definition, these 3 sentences at the end were adopted by 44 countries, which is the only politically approved definition of AI. Plus, in April this year, European Commission adopted this definition as well, with a change of 1 word, where they introduced the word softer only somehow, which I kind of a little bit disagree, but fine, right? So this is roughly the structure or structural view to this definition of AI. So on the right side you see the environment, which in principle can be anything, right? Can be anything, can be natural environment, can be virtual environment, like for instance game of chess, right? Or anything what we observe, right? Then on the top we have this so-called perceiving or percepts, right? And whatever we observe, we see through some kind of raw data, right? And sensors convert this raw data into something which we call these days data, right? And then we have different ways how to operate this data. Typically, so the central part of this, let's say, AI operational logic, as we call, is the model, right? Model is an abstraction of this environment or the world on the right side, right? And of course, once we have a model, we use it, right? We do inferencing, and then we try to act, and we try to change the environment in one or the other way. And so we change the environment, and this is then the closed loop, right? So this is pretty much the definition of AI. Now, the question is how the current or past or even future AI would fit this definition. So here are a couple of examples, right? Old technology from 80s, right? Expert systems, right? So the transition through this definition diagram would be like this, right? So we observe, so humans typically observe the environment, right? Humans provide the data, not the machines, right? Humans create the model, and then humans typically also act, right? So this is the technology or the AI of 80s, right? Now if you go to standard machine learning loop, right? So we go through the same boxes, but in slightly different ways. So typically machines would collect the data, or sometimes humans, right? Then we have model construction algorithm. This is pretty much the machine learning algorithms. We have a model, and then model interpretation and acting happens also more or less automatically. If you look at just autonomous driving, it would look like this, right? So, and pretty much all the AI technologies we can imagine would fit in one or the other way this definition. So that's why it's fairly complete. Now, another aspect which is relevant whenever we talk about AI and regulation, right? So we immediately come to terms like human-centered AI, or accountability, responsibility, transparency, risk management, and so on. So now, each of these terms, which are typically used by policymakers and lawyers mostly, right? So they fit this fairly technical definition of AI. So this is just one trial where some of this, let's say, AI principles or concepts which are integrated in regulations are kind of hidden, right? Also, another aspect of AI is bias, right? So bias is a very popular topic, especially for, well, people which are concerned about possible improper way of using AI, right? So these are like spots in this definition where these bias are coming from. Either we have perception bias, right? So where we make mistakes when we observe the environment. There's always perception bias, right? Technical bias, so algorithms bring in additional troubles, and also if everything is okay, then still we can have activation bias. Maybe everything was perfect, right, but when we make a move, right, when we act, when we try to, let's say in autonomous car, decide left or right, actions are not always perfect either, right? Now, going a little bit one level higher. So who is dealing with AI regulation these days, right? So here you see set of international organizations which are all active in AI regulations or in one or the other way. So let's say starting, so out of all these organizations, two are really relevant, I would say, in terms that they will produce legally binding documents on AI. So one is Council of Europe, which deals mostly with AI and in relationship with human rights. I mean, this sounds simple, but it's not, right? So I'm on that panel as well, and to be honest, I'm more like, well, as researcher, technologist, right? On the other side, they're sitting lawyers, human rights lawyers, and I learned a lot, and I guess they learned also a lot from our more like technical side, right? So issues related to human rights are fairly complicated. So it's not just human rights as adopted, but also consequences of human rights have, let's say, along most of the SDGs, for instance, right? Another, maybe, I wouldn't say even more important, but for us here in Europe, kind of relevant is European Commission, which is also coming with a document. At the moment we have this so-called AI Act, which is more like a draft document, which will be adopted next year. So this will be another probably legally binding document, right? The other organizations, especially I would highlight here OECD and UNESCO, so they are coming more like with recommendations, right? Recommendations, which means like a soft law, right? But pretty relevant for forming an opinion or even understanding what this AI and what consequences of AI might be, right? So all these organizations jointly are grouped in something which is called globalpolicy.ai. So this portal was launched last week here at this high-level conference of AI at Brda here in Slovenia. And so they mostly work together, although each of these organizations has its own focus, right? UNESCO would have more like ethical issues, right? OECD more on the economy side, the European Commission fairly holistic, I would say, while as mentioned, Council of Europe more like on a human rights aspect. So here I want to go, so these are the actual documents which are at the moment relevant, but let's say in half a year I would expect that these documents mostly will either change or evolve, right? Maybe just the last slide on this for the first topic is where's the big problem when regulating AI, right? So on one side we have AI systems, we have technologists, researchers, people like me, right? So, and we are doing AI for decades, right? So, and what we can do, we can measure. We have all sorts of algorithmic approaches which, or technical approaches which prevent us to lie to ourselves and so on, right? So this is AI about when you try to build a system. And we establish good terminology and so on. But this terminology is not compatible on the other side with the lawyers and policymakers, right? So, and lawyers and policymakers, from our standpoint, they operate with way more abstract terms which are relevant for, well, policies and regulations, right? And I would say for the last 3-4 years, these discussions are mainly how to bridge this gap, right? This gap between these two worlds. And I think we are doing a good job, but it's slower as we all expected. Okay, let's now just go a little bit further. So I will be here. So I don't have opportunity to do live demo. So I will show just the screenshots from a system which we are developing together with OECD. And this is like real-time observation of AI. So AI is not something static, right? So AI of like 80s or 90s or 2000s or AI of today, they're very different AIs, and even AI of tomorrow or in the next 5 to 10 years will be certainly different, right? Today, for today's AI, we can say that it can solve complex but very narrow problems. AI of, let's say, in 5 to 10 years, we will talk about AI which will deal with fairly holistic problems, right? Topics like digital twins, complete observations on optimization of large complex systems. So this will be AI of tomorrow, so to say. So for that purpose, we are building the system OECD AI Observatory, Policy Observatory, which is turning into something which we are calling OECD AI digital twin. So digital twin of artificial intelligence. So we are using AI itself to observe and understand evolution of AI. So why we are doing this? So the premise is the following. So everybody knows that, well, innovation cycle is not short. So innovations or inventions of which came out like 10 years ago are shaping our lives today. And this won't change in the future. So inventions which are coming out today, right, will shape our lives in like 5 to 10 years from now. So effectively we can say that everything what will shape our lives in 10 years pretty much is already published and even openly accessible. It's just a question how to find these things, right? What we try to do is the following, right? And each of the lines here is covered by particular dynamic evolving data set. On the follow-up slides, you will see some of the visualizations out of this. So basically, we try to model a journey of an idea, a journey of an innovation, right? So innovation typically happens first in the academic world. You can find this in the papers, journals, and so on. So these are innovation triggers, right? Next, this innovation to actually get implemented, you need projects, right? So projects which implement the idea itself and put it in a context, right? These projects can be either, let's say in computer science, would be either open source projects or publicly funded projects like national or European Commission's projects like Horizon and so on, right? Then next stage typically would be patents, right? So if the invention is good, well, it gets patent, right? Then you get companies, companies get investments, right? And if you have companies, of course, this has influence on job market, either on the supply side or demand side. And then market reacts, right? You can see, and this is still discussion about the same innovation which started in the first line, right? So market reacts, and then this has all influence also in the education. So now we are getting like the the whole history of the curricula across thousands of universities, and we can see across years how curricula are getting changed due to, let's say, innovations from like 5 or 10 years ago, right? Then we can measure perception through search engines or media, and at the end we have also policy documents. So this is the innovation cycle as we would like to observe it, right? And most of this we are already observing. So here I hope it will work. So otherwise, normally I would show this live, right? So you can find this on OECD.ai. So this is one kind of simple visualization of AI for last more or less 20 years, right? So you can see the rise of China, right? So US and EU, so each bubble here is a country. Higher the bubble, richer the country, higher GDP, right, per capita, and more to the right, bigger production in AI. And as you see, so on the lower right corner, you can see the year. As you see, China really made a huge difference in the last 20 years, right? The bubble of China came pretty much from nowhere to the more or less first place now, right? So these are kind of 3 superpowers in AI. So US, obviously, right? All big tech is there. In terms of research, EU is standing pretty good, but we are lacking the companies, obviously, and China, which is fairly complete and also fairly isolated, as you will see now from the next slide. Okay, so these are, let's say, AI research per institution. So on the top you would see Chinese universities nowadays, right? So followed by, well, famous American ones, but Chinese, let's say, this happened pretty much in the last 5 years, right? This is the landscape, who works with whom. On the left side you see the, well, big island, which is basically Chinese collaborations, right? So, or Chinese island of AI, which is only vaguely connected to the right island where you have US and Europe and Australia on the bottom, right? So this is the landscape of collaboration in globally these days, right? Then these are the topics. Okay, you cannot see the legend well. So the big topics still in AI are related to deep learning. Deep learning is this AI which made a change in the last 10 years because it's a simple technique, but when you join this fairly simple technique with big computing power and lots of data, then you get amazingly good results. So it's an old technique from 50s. Everybody can understand it. So these are neural networks, right? Basically high school math, it's good enough to understand what's happening there. Just when you put this on scale with lots of data on GPUs, and this makes a huge difference. And so this popularity of AI today basically is due to this curve on the top, right? This graph is interesting. So whenever we talk about AI, it's battle for talent, really. So as part of this data, which I was mentioning before, we have also LinkedIn data, and we calculated this skill migration. So on the top, you see countries which are gaining AI skills. So, and on the bottom, you see countries which are losing AI skills. So on the very bottom, you would see Venezuela, Tunisia, Iran, and so on. Educated people, but well, conditions in the country maybe are not the right ones. On the top of the countries, you would see Luxembourg, United Emirates, Ireland, and many European and other countries. So these countries are gaining the talent. So, and this is not really, I mean, this is changing from month to month, right? But it's definitely in favor of the Western world in the moment, right? Okay, this would be top skills. Yeah, so among others, we monitor also the job market of AI. So per week we get roughly a few 100,000 job postings related to AI, and we analyze the skills which are in demand by countries, and this would be the top AI skills at the moment, right? So it's real-time feed, and pretty much we can spot on a monthly basis changes, what's being demanded by the companies, right? So mostly it's, okay, machine learning, obviously AI itself, it's mentioned in the job postings, but of course, let's say, you see on the number spot 7, let's say Tensorflow, which we will analyze a little bit further on the next slides, and various tools related to neural networks, and computer vision. These are also relevant topics. So this is top 20 skills, but we have obviously many more, and this is updated on a weekly basis, right? Okay, this is just maybe I can skip this one. Investments are interesting as well. So we are following also investments into AI. Now here you can see, so we track investments into AI across globally, right? As you see, the increase is huge, right? From, let's say, 10 years ago till now, and this is only accelerating. Now, if you go per country, so US has huge investments. So China is seems like on a second spot. It's unclear do our data actually correspond to reality. Seems like that China might be even ahead of US. It's just our data doesn't correspond. The rest of the countries, not much really in comparison to, let's say, US, right? So this is the difference of who has big tech companies, right? Maybe just to touch the last slide, right? So before I mentioned TensorFlow as one pretty relevant skill, and what TensorFlow is. TensorFlow is Google's AI system, which basically each of you is using several times per day. Every time when you make a Google query, Google search, TensorFlow software would be triggered as well to bring results back. Whenever you do machine translation, whenever you do speech recognition, it's always this TensorFlow software in behind, right? So as part of this OECD AI Observatory, I wanted to show how this TensorFlow appeared in the AI ecosystem, right? So on the x-axis you have time. On y-axis you have basically the hype, the importance, right? So the first curve is showing the media reporting about TensorFlow. So TensorFlow was announced in 2015. And as you see, it was a big media campaign, a lot of publications, and then this media graph went slowly down. Okay, as we said before, what follows such a media campaign? Obviously projects, right? So since we have pretty much complete snapshot of GitHub, we checked how many of new projects appeared related to TensorFlow on GitHub. And you see, basically, following campaign, basically the GitHub responded right away. So huge number of projects, and this is not even disappearing, right? Okay, what are results of projects? So this is actually measured data from fairly complete global data, right? The next thing, what's following are academic publications. So you have projects, so you have results. So academic publications follow as results of the projects, right? What's the next? Patents, right? Patents follow the publications, so good ideas are getting patented. And of course, here we have then companies, and job market follows right away, right? And you see that this is like fairly short innovation cycle for TensorFlow. It's more like in the range of, let's say, 5 years. On this graph we could put a couple of other dimensions, including policy and so on, which would follow even this. But this is an example of how ecosystem of AI evolves bit by bit, right, through time. Okay, so this is pretty much the last slide I had. So my point here was maybe to highlight a little bit AI from two angles, right? So first, what AI is from the side of regulators, and what AI is in this evidence-based manner, how to measure AI and how to observe its evolution. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Marco, for the great speech, on the great intro. I'm Robert Kopic, I'm your moderator today. Very important, as we're discussing the Sustainable Development Goals today, we will also show you a very quick intro into the actual topic, which our Slovenian colleagues prepared, so enjoy.
We can be.
We must be
the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done.
The global goals.
A 15-year plan
for everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody,
anywhere, lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
Where no one wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die
of diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone
goes to school. And education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
and be powerful
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is headed back.
We will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets
at home, at school, and at work.
We will live in a world where
there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper.
And new wealth
leads to decent jobs
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
our infrastructure, and our
best innovations
are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world
where prejudices and extremes of inequality
are defeated
inside our countries
and between different countries.
Where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
Where we replace
what we consume.
Planet where we put back
what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
Where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
Where we restore and protect
life on land.
The forests,
animals,
the earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people
work together
in partnerships of all kinds
to make these goals a reality
for everyone, everywhere. These are the United Nations global goals
for sustainable development.
Let's get to work. Let's make it happen.
I think that was a perfect tone setter for my next speaker. So her name is Mariana De La Roche. She's the lead project manager of the IOTA Foundation. And she's also in ATPA's chair of their Social Impact Committee. And I'm very happy to ask her on the stage now. So Mariana, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this event and joining us today here in Ljubljana to discuss the potential of blockchain and artificial intelligence to achieve the SDGs. I would like to thank especially the Presidency of Slovenia for organizing this event, as well as my fellow speakers that join us during this week. My name, as was already said, is Mariana De La Roche. I'm the lead project manager of the IOTA Foundation, and I'm the co-chair of the social impact group at INATPA. The SDGs gain major relevance when we consider that we already failed in achieving the Millennium Goals, and that we are not far from the same failure with the Sustainable Development Goals. This might not be the best statement to welcome this panel, but it's a reality that we all need to face. Knowing how critical actions are needed to actually achieve them give us the opportunity of considering new approaches and ideas that increase our chances of global success. Achieving the SDGs by 2030 is not a battle we have lost yet, and innovative technologies and projects bring hope to the table. Currently, we count with technologies we didn't have 10 years ago, and have the potential to exponentially increase the impact that we are creating in societies. When used for the right reasons, these technologies have great potential to help us achieving the SDGs. The Social Impact Group of INATPA, in collaboration with IOTA Foundation, iPod Systems, Script Media, and Comfort, producing a report released early this month, which presents the challenges and opportunities that blockchain projects are facing right now when trying to address the SDGs. Mainly, the projects surveyed on the report showcase the potential of the new technologies in regards to social impact, and I would like to quickly present some examples to you. DGIT, funded by the European Commission, intends to create digital twins of mines in European countries to monitor raw materials, the production of raw materials, and the mine's environmental impact. The idea of doing this is improving the efficiency and the sustainability of the mine operations in an immutable and transparent way. Another example is the DMRB project funded by the Canadian government, with the Canadian government that is working in creating a system for monitoring climate operations, guaranteeing the veracity of the data that is reported and later utilized by climate researchers and institutions relying on data that cannot be faked. The last project that I would like to mention is the City Exchange project funded by the European Union as well. This project enables the development of a framework and supporting tools to promote a common energy market, which will lead to regulations and new policy interventions with market deregulation and business model that will deliver positive energy communities, while providing absolute certainty as where the green energy is coming from. The report evidenced that the SDGs played a considerable role when ideating these projects, especially blockchain projects. However, it also indicates that there is not alignment among the projects in what we understand for impact or how we are measuring the impact. Therefore, the report concluded that there is a need for a standardized framework for measuring the impact of blockchains in society. Besides blockchain, organizations like QAA are using artificial intelligence to analyze big data and track behavior change in societies. This creates the opportunity to understand where the major gaps are and what are the biases in society, and thus where solutions are needed to address these challenges. AR4 Labs is another example of an organization working in reducing the friction in human-computer interaction. There are many examples, but I just wanted to point some of them to basically say that achieving the SDGs is not an easy task, but these are clear examples that showcase that we finally have technologies that provide us with a feasible chance to succeed in creating a sustainable and more equal world for all of us. During the pandemic, we have witnessed the potential of the whole world to act quickly to new challenges and use technologies in order to tackle these unprecedented challenges. We have witnessed the unique opportunity of these technology solutions and the opportunity that they have provided us to address these times of crisis. There are still 9 more years to achieve the target made by the SDGs. And I really believe that if we give the same opportunity that we give during the pandemic to these technologies, especially DLT and AI, the opportunity that we gave them to help us during the pandemic, the failure that we had with the Millennium Goals will not be repeated. One thing that I would like to highlight, and it's also coming from the report that we create with INATPA, is that impact doesn't happen in silos, and we need more standardization and interoperability among the different projects in order to actually create impact that will be relevant in all the regions and for all of us. With the working group of INATPA, we are prioritizing right now creating a framework for impact measurement, and we hope that with this framework we can showcase the impact that different projects are presenting in society. And we would like to showcase this impact and go beyond the deadline of the 2030 with the SDGs, but actually creating more permanent and sustainable world for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana, for those important words and this important call. As a next participant, I would like to introduce Stefano Cantarelli. He's the chairman of the advisory group on advanced technology for trade and transport at the United Nations.
Thank you for having invited me to the European Blockchain Week in Slovenia. It's, first of all, I want to apologize for not there. But unfortunately, some of my work activities do not allow me to travel now. So I am the chair of the advisory group on advanced technology. And I must say that I welcome very much this invitation, but more expert than me on blockchain issues is the vice chair of the group, Ms. Nena Dukozov, who I thank for this invitation. The United Nations Center for Trade Facilitation and Electronic Business, CFACT, has established an advisory group on advanced technologies in trade and logistics, AGAT, in order to advise and support the Secretariat and the CFACT on advanced technologies in trade facilitation and electronic business. The technologies on which we are working are artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and distributed ledger technology, because they hold significant promise in facilitating sustainable trade and logistics. The group was formed in 2020 and comprises experts working in private sector, government, intergovernmental organization, non-governmental organization, and academia. Our focus is to monitor, study, and analyze the latest developments and use cases of technology applications, as well as challenges and obstacles they face while applying these new technologies, and the lessons learned to overcome them, trying to help members of the community to learn from each other. Basically, our working areas are technical monitoring, assessment and advice, implementation challenges and good practices, and the support for strategic dialogue with external stakeholders. We have done some works in these 2 years after the establishment, in this 1.5 years after the establishment of the group. And of course, our work was impacted by the COVID-19 outbreak. We had a first online conference on the role of advanced technologies in overcoming COVID-related disruption in international trade, because this was a major event, of course. And then we had a session. I apologize, my phone is ringing right now. We had a session, flight mode, sorry, on advanced technologies to support circular economy in achieving the UN SDGs. And then we focused on artificial intelligence as a contributor to support sustainability and circular economy in the current world, because the world now has been changed by the COVID pandemic, of course. I wanted to make some few considerations on how advanced technologies, in particular the blockchain, can help our sustainability efforts. In a linear economy, a product is produced, used, and disposed. In a linear supply chain, individual participants generally have a limited view of the entire supply chain. Participants know their contributions and the contribution of the parties with whom they are in direct contact, but they lack the visibility of the full supply chain. And this can contribute to unpredictable lead times, product delays, and in case of recalls, time wasted tracing the source of the problem. Think now, for example, to what is happening with electronics chips sourcing. A blockchain-enabled supply chain allows to share a single view of all the data of all the circular supply chain, enabling the transparency in the supply chain, ensuring that all the parties have visibility and can somehow be sure of the authenticity and provenance of the products that are used in this supply chain. Supply chain actors, like retailers and consumers, can access the data for given products directly from the blockchain, removing the need for suppliers to provide this data on demand to the supply chain actors, to retailers and consumers. And this, of course, can help the consumers in knowing and verifying the source of their products and the authenticity of their product, and thus enable us to support our efforts in sustainable sourcing and consumption. As the population grows and we have a strong impact on the world resources, it becomes more important to create circular ecosystem-based approaches. So focus on replenishment and renewability. In a circular economy, we try to repurpose product to ensure that the product loses as little value as possible. We have very few losses, and we recycle the product back in the supply chain. This can be done by extending the use cycle of length of the product, by increasing the use of the product, for example, by sharing with the sharing economy, by recycling or reusing the product, often bringing it back to the initial producer. This requires new business models. One of these business models is a circular supply chain, and a blockchain is an enabling technology for circular supply chains, as it enables more accurate and transparent tracking across all the supply chain, as I said before, and also some degrees of dispute resolution, especially across border, where you need to have global trust infrastructures. One particular entity in international trade are site audits that are conducted against a set of standards and are used to evaluate suppliers across some areas like sustainability, for example, in water conservation and land preservation, the environmental impact of the production processes, like child labor avoidance, like social responsibility for working conditions, etc. The outputs of these site audits are certifications in form of electronic documents, so that the downstream retailers and brands can use these certifications in order to ensure their compliance with their social and sustainability objectives. Transactions along these chains are also audited, and some certifications organizations provide a centralized repositories for their certifications, which, and of course, using a blockchain to record and to make available these certifications reduces the opportunity for tampering and increases the trust in the certifications. I don't want to go on much longer in my address, but I want to give you another example of a growing area for blockchain usage to support sustainability, which is the carbon emissions management. Organizations can balance their carbon budgets and emissions accounting measures, ensuring that emissions output is at least equal to the avoided emissions, and this can be done by purchasing carbon offsets. Carbon offsets are produced by projects that carry out emissions reduction activities. These emission reduction activities need to be audited and recorded and tracked. And for example, installing renewable energy infrastructure, planting trees, access to optimizing transportation and logistics. And these offsets can be traded as part of compliance markets where government regulations requires emitters to reduce their emissions or purchase offsets. This carbon market is an excellent use case for blockchain technology by including transparency, immutability, and security within the context of a publicly verifiable ecosystem. It can also enable the attribution of assets, effective and correct attribution of assets, proving how assets are created and changed and exchanged. Tokenizing carbon offsets can solve many of the issues that carbon markets have, enabling more accurate ownership tracking, increasing the market liquidity, and enabling also cross-market exchanges at a global level. To conclude, I believe that there are three major areas where blockchain can be an SDG game changer, which are implied in the things I said before. The first one is building resilient and transparent supply chains, creating stronger and more accountable public institution, as in the example of the carbon offset trading bodies, and finally supporting and facilitating the ultimate responsible for the migration, the evolution towards a sustainable lifestyle, which is enabling us consumers in our efforts for responsible sourcing and consumption. I would like to share finally, if you want to know more about the work of the Advisory Group on Advanced Technologies, you can refer to this URL or just plain search AGAT UN CFACT with your favorite search engine, and there you can find some documents of our work. Thank you very much and congratulations for this important event. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefano, for the great introduction and the great overview of the work you do, which is very important. And then another important contributor today is Josip Maricevic, who's the co-founder and CTO of Tolo.io, which I would like to welcome now to our panel. Josip, if you're there.
So, as Robert said, I'm Josip Maricevic, CTO and co-founder of Dollar Hashnet, and today I'm going to talk about latest generation of distributed ledger technology and how is it being applied in real-world scenarios and how is it helping achieve some of the SDGs that were already mentioned today. So, well, I assume that most of you know how and why of blockchain technology. Let us just cover some of the basics which make the blockchain interesting to enterprise and general public. So what exactly we mean when we say blockchain? When the whole story started, it literally meant single linked list of blocks containing transactions and being linked with hash pointers. Today, that term generally encompasses all the technologies for distributed ledgers, no matter if they're used directed as cyclic graph, lists, or something else. And for each ledger, you have to have owners of specific accounts. Here, in order to verify your owner of some specific output or coins, you'd have to prove you have a private key for them. There is no central authority with accounts or something similar. And that also implies that no one needed to know unless you wanted to publish it. What is the actual identity behind each public key which were used as addresses? And at the end, since no one knew anyone or trusted anyone, every full node was storing full ledger and every full node was verifying everything. With that, you get the following characteristics. In the first generation, this ledger was used only for literal currency transactions, and in later generation, virtual machine layers that supported Turing-complete languages were added, which enabled distributed execution of complex logic processes. Now, after we pass through what makes blockchain interesting, let's go through basics of how is it used. First, and of course, the most natural, since it started that way with Bitcoin, it can be used as a general transaction platform. Now, you might say, why would we need that? There are already thousands of transaction platforms out there. However, there are some specific properties that blockchain-based platform provides as an advantage to classic centralized solutions. The most important one, it acts as a perfectly distributed system. There is no single node that has more power or more authority than others. In example, there is no single authority or third party which we have to trust if we want to interact with the system. Secondly, it works as a pen-only ledger, similar as if you were writing all your transactions in ink on paper. Even if some transactions were made by error, it doesn't matter. It would be written forever in there, and if it needs to be updated or fixed, it would need to be fixed with a new transaction, always leaving the whole log behind. Thirdly, since nobody trusts anybody else, all data needs to be available for everyone to verify it independently. And that means you have transparency in the whole process. And lastly, performance, something we know that the first generation had a lot of problems with, but has significantly improved. So since I've been mentioning generations of blockchain, here's the division on how we see it. First generation were the initial blockchain networks like Bitcoin and Forex. They are simple networks with real limited throughput and high energy consumption due to the proof of work method used for mining. Even now, like one of the latest statistics that I read is that just the Bitcoin mining, not even taking into account all the other proof of work based chains, is wasting more electricity than 153 countries of the world put together. Then in the second generation, we get some improvement to the transaction capacity, but more significant addition was that of the Turing complete virtual machines, which meant that you could execute almost any program or logic you required. Ethereum is here still the best example. After that, the focus shifts on scalability and throughput, which is being achieved with different consensus mechanisms, which managed to raise TPS to around thousands. And currently, the last generation of DLT, where throughput is up to tens of thousands of transactions per second with ability to run smart contracts, making it finally production ready for bigger systems. So let's have some concrete data. In first column, you can see Bitcoin, which had around 7 TPS before the SegWit and now around 9. Time to finality is measured in tens of minutes, sometimes even hours if the network is congested. Then we have the Ethereum with 20 transactions per second. And as we mentioned, the last generations like Hashnet and Hedera with tens of thousands of transactions per second. And what is sometimes more important, time to finality in low 2 to 7 seconds. Because sometimes if you want to use it for some real world problem, even for the currency, like as a classic currency, you don't want to actually wait for like minutes or tens of minutes before something is finally confirmed and irreversible on the blockchain. Now, after all that, you're probably wondering where the blockchain fits. Well, the best path to see that would be to try to identify some specific problems your customers or your organization have, keeping in mind specific properties of the blockchain we covered. Or alternatively, if you're more interested in innovation, see what current operating models you could disrupt by having such a platform. It is also not uncommon that it might help you with some of your specific internal processes. And once you identified specific use cases where you think blockchain would produce a real return on investment, you start with a pilot and track results until you see it's ready for production environment. So let's quickly go through some of the examples. The one example that's been mentioned already quite a few times in this event is the European blockchain services infrastructure. So the main idea is to finally have a cross-border Europe-wide digital platform with high standards of security and privacy, which would enable member states not only to provide the services to their citizens, but to make it interoperable between all of them. The pilots that are running on version 1.0 of European blockchain services infrastructure are notarization, identity framework, diplomas, and data sharing. Also, I would like to mention here that Slovenian national infrastructure pilot called C2p was recently launched. Actually, not so recently now. It's been over a year and a half. It will be almost 2 years now in December. C2p will be a topic of several more presentations today, so I will not go into much details, but it's a great example of real-world use case. Launched in Slovenia at December 2019, with Telemach providing hardware infrastructure and Hashnet providing consensus and virtual machine platforms. It serves as one of the first national blockchain pilot platforms, not just in the EU, but in the world. Having the ability to execute smart contracts makes the possibilities endless. Then, of course, there are finance applications, the most obvious ones since the blockchain started that way as well, as a payment platform where you don't need to trust the central authority. And large generation of blockchain like Hashnet is more than enough to satisfy requirements of system, for example, instant payments in SEPA area or point-of-sale terminals. Bonds may be something that is not so obvious as the first two ones, but once you pause to think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Instead of using traditional bonds, you can use smart contract technology, which have all the rules and logic included, and automatically, of course, enforce. As we mentioned, the transparency and append-only properties of blockchain, it makes it ideal for different types of audits. Once some transaction or document enters the system, the log is there forever. It can be used as an additional layer to your classic process, and once, if there is some discrepancy or need for audit arrives, having tamper-proof append-only log can help save you a lot of headaches and a lot of time. And digital identity, the use case that could have the whole presentation about itself, especially considering evolving European self-sovereign identity framework that many of you have probably heard of. First, you as a user get to control all your data with your private keys, which can be stored on your ID card, USB stick, or some other sort of hardware wallet. As long as you have the sole ownership of that key, you and only you can control all your data, validate and verify documents and signatures, and with hashing, even allow different entities in network to exchange or verify your KYC data without having to explicitly divulge personal information with all of them. So we mentioned the sustainable development goals. Since Tolar Hashnet algorithm is not using proof of work and is behind these properties that we mentioned already, it has been recognized as a fast distributed ledger solution in supporting UN's sustainable development goals, specifically Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, Goal 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and Goals 11, sustainable cities and communities, 12, responsible consumption and production, and 17, the Partnership for the Goals by UN's Economic and Social Council, in the document Blockchain in Trade Facilitation, Sectoral Challenges and Examples. So that was the short summary. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out even after this event. We'll be happy to answer everything. Thank you for listening.
Philippe Rixon, he's the Innovation and Research Director of DigiCity. Philippe, please, floor is yours.
Good morning. And thank you, Nina Dokuzo and Tadej Slapnik, for inviting me in Slovenia. This EU summit links the digital agenda with the Green Deal. The original Green Deal was sealed thousands of years ago. Mankind was placed in the Garden of Eden to till it and tend it. We are the stewards of the planet. We have a duty of sustainability. The story of the Garden of Eden presents another relevant aspect for this morning. When you read it carefully, you will discover that the protagonists are engaged in few primary activities. They gain knowledge, they work, and they rest. That is what makes us human. Working, knowing, resting. First, we learn. Pursuing the Sustainable Development Goals must begin with quality education. Otherwise, the pursuit itself would not be sustainable. The brilliant polymath Michael Polanyi researched knowledge, wrote books about it, and is abundantly quoted. First quote: "The amount of knowledge which we can justify from evidence directly available to us can never be large. The overwhelming proportion of our factual beliefs continue therefore to be held at second hand through trusting others. And in the great majority of cases, our trust is placed in the authority and comparatively few people of widely acknowledged standing." For us this morning, this raised the question of the authenticity of education content. Second quote: "Personal participation is the universal principle of knowing." For us, this points to two requirements: the personalization of education content and the participatory experience necessary for its interiorization. Third quote: "I suggest that the community of scientists is organized in a way which resembles certain feature of a body politic and works according to economic principles similar to those by which the production of material goods is regulated." For us this morning, economic principles and regulated production applied to education content. And a third topic, the sustainability of the production of this content. Can authenticity, personalization, and sustainability benefit from blockchain and AI? Authenticity. Establishing the provenance of any media has become critical. To address this issue at scale for creators, publishers, and consumers, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, C2pA, has developed a technical specification for providing content provenance and authenticity. It is designed to enable global, opt-in adoption of digital provenance techniques through the creation of an ecosystem of provenance-enabled application. Application that must meet appropriate security, privacy, and control requirements. Regulatory bodies and government agencies could use this specification to establish standards for digital provenance. The C2p architecture is a model for storing and accessing cryptographically verifiable information. Its trustworthiness can be assessed based on a defined trust model. The C2p architecture, the C2p specification, contains statements that cover areas such as creation, authorship, edition, capture device, and bindings to content. These statements, called assertions, make up the provenance of a given asset. They represent a series of trust signals which can be interpreted by humans. Assertions are wrapped up with additional information into a digitally signed entity called a claim. The verifiable credential of individual actors involved in the creation of assertions can be added to the C2p information to provide additional trust signals. These assertions, claims, credentials, signatures are all bound together into a verified unit called a manifest by a hardware or software component called a claim generator. The sets of manifests represents the provenance data. These are specifications. My colleagues and others are reviewing them. A lot of work remains to be done, and then we'll launch research, development, and finally deployment. Personalization. Quality educators pursue several groups of objectives. One of them is content personalization. Teachers want to provide equal opportunity to big classrooms, involve students in the educational process, take learning outside of the school into the learners' lives, personalize the education process, and assist students with self-direction, self-assessment, and teamwork. AI systems are used to tailor learning for each individual student. Through hyper-personalization based on machine learning, AI systems are used to develop a custom learning profile of each student and customize the training materials for each individual based on their ability, preferred mode of learning, and experience. Then, AI systems can condense content of a simple textbook into a more digestible study guide, offering to the students various learning materials from interactive textbooks to customized interface, thus increasing the learner's engagement. Finally, the use of AI algorithm can monitor students' actions and their answers to questions and help identify which concept the educator needs to teach again. Sustainability. The Copyright Act of 1710 granted the rights to copy, opened the publishing market, and facilitated mass education. A great move if one respects the balance set in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to participate in education, and everyone has the right to be remunerated for any educational production of which they are the authors. As long as we use printed education books, that was simple. Now that teachers curate dynamically digital content for a specific lecture of a specific course in a specific school, that is complex. One might be tempted to say too complex. Grant exceptions, you don't have to pay. Or postpone accurate remuneration through blanket licenses. We know what happens if quality is not paid. It disappears. Blockchain and artificial intelligence can and must help dealing with complexity. A professor wants to use a few digital excerpts of this Slovenian journal to illustrate one course of geography. The value of the related license is much too low to afford a human intervention. The licensing and remuneration process must be automated. We could find the DNA of a selected excerpt. With that DNA, we could query an open rights data framework and retrieve information about who wrote what, who took which picture, and what can we do with that text or that illustration. Machine-readable metadata and licensing context can feed an expert system which can generate human and machine-readable micro-licenses for a fraction of the cost of human interventions. In this example, a combination of established technologies, different types of blockchain applications, and several AI systems reduce the complexity to such a level that there is no excuse anymore not to pay the creators of digital education content. Blockchain and AI must help. Personally, I do not see any current alternative to secure authenticity, personalization, and sustainability of learning material, the three necessary conditions for a quality education. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. And now, last but not least, I would like to hand over to Thomas Levac, who's the CEO and founder of Origin Trails. I hope he's already online. Ah, even better. There you go. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your locations. I'll try to keep this efficient since I think we're running a little bit over time, but still tackle this very important topic that we speak of today, the Sustainable Development Goals. It's very, very hard to overestimate or extend the importance of United Nations function today. The vision, the mission, the work that they're putting in this connected global world is absolutely crucial. And in the same breath, Sustainable Development Goals are one of the most impactful initiatives within the UN, especially those that are touching each and every individual globally that's been set out. So when we're looking at such a beast of a problem, such a beast of an initiative, what I'd like to do is look at it from a parallel of what Origin Trails is focusing on and how we're tackling certain issues within our domains, find certain parallels. And if I'll manage to, I'll try to chop this up in 3 phases and look at it piece by piece so we see what tangibly we can do to advance this topic even further. So phase number 1 is something that I've kind of felt even as, I was as a kid training basketball. When we were playing without counting points, the quality of the game was really low. So as soon as we started counting points, that really went up. The same thing within the company. You've got KPIs, you know what to track. A problem identified is a problem solved. And UN and the SDG initiative, man, that was a big task to do. 17 goals that were identified, that were pinpointed in terms of what to put our focus on as humanity, to really show how we can ensure that as humanity we also persevere all the challenges that we have in front of us and make sure that everyone's better off. So on this phase 1, big task, great check mark. Then we come to phase 2, which, either in basketball court, a little easier because everyone can count more or less, but even there you had certain altercations happening, whether one up or one down was actually the score. Within the company, it's even more tricky because you gotta find the right KPIs, how to track them, create proper mechanisms to capture data. And here we're talking about SDGs, around the global 17 goals. Every country to be involved in measuring, capturing, and gathering this data around, are we really making progress? Because despite the fact that we might have identified those challenges, if we're not tracking it correctly, we're not really getting there. And I think this is where currently with the SDGs we stand. And I think that there's quite a bit of parallels with what we've done with Origin Trail, especially in the field of global supply chains, can be applicable. Origin Trail is a world's first decentralized knowledge graph. Its intention is to offer a few very important value propositions and act as a middleware that can connect fragmented realities, fragmented systems, by providing interoperability, by providing interconnectivity, and by leveraging blockchain, also providing the integrity that is required. Taking that into the SDG field, by utilizing something like a decentralized knowledge graph, what it allows is for all the disparate fragmented systems to be able to put in, to provide, to contribute the data that they've been accumulating on key things, and at the same time make this data discoverable by leveraging blockchain-based technologies, make it verifiable, so when someone is looking at it, they can actually make sure that it's truthful, and at the end of the day, make it valuable, because it's about driving motivations as well. And here I think lies the inflection point between the phase 2 and phase 3. And the phase 3 is really igniting the motions, making people motivated, making people feel included. Because at the end of the day, you know, we can spend a lot of effort trying to just make people feel important about certain goals. We can really put a lot of effort into communicating how people should get involved in certain causes. But it's about including them as a part of the process. That's the only way that really makes things happen. Whether that's organizations, whether it's countries, whether it's agencies, or it's individuals on the very lowest of levels. We need to find systems that can be neutral, that can support all different stakeholders to get involved, to share, to contribute data, and at the same time make this data, which is for the common good, available, make it accessible, make it verifiable and valuable, so that others can build their own business models on top of it. How can we come up with solutions to problems that we don't have enough foundation to work on? I think that once we get to that point, things will get a little bit more clear. And I have zero doubt in my head that some sort of a fabric that enables that is absolutely necessary. And blockchain technology, blockchain-based technologies like Origin Trail, decentralized knowledge graph are absolutely vital in making this thing a reality and allowing for solutions to be built. And then once we're kind of coming to the phase 3, I'm sure that the reports are all of a sudden going to turn for the better, and we're going to have a better way to even look further and beyond the current goals that we've set, be more ambitious in terms of how we can achieve them. And I have to say that despite not directly working on the one goal at a time, Origin Trail's mission and vision has sustainability written all over it, because as soon as you start focusing on the right values, things start to multiply. Transparency, trust, providing better connections, providing better interoperability among systems, including more people to be involved in a process, is something that yields results. And it's yielding results for global organizations. Just yesterday on this stage, I was sharing a panel with the Group Director of Innovation, British Standard Institution, who would have a lot of say to the sustainable goals as well, since that's a part of their mission as well. And just talking about how to make frictionless international trade happen. And that's the thing. I think it's just making it sustainable by design is how we're gonna make this successful. And these type of technologies have to play a key cornerstone role in enabling that. Again, I said I'll try to keep this efficient, so I hope I didn't take too much of the time, and I hopefully saved a couple of minutes as well for the moderator as they turn to the next panel. And I really hope and believe that since the phase 1 was done well, we are battling together to get the phase 2 happen, and I'm excited to have access to all these important things that will be enabled by these technologies, so that we can also go to the phase 3 and bring it home. I'm looking forward to the discussion and seeing what type of solutions that we come up with today as well, and for all of those that dialed in. Thank you very much for your attention, and wish you a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. We have a very short break because we have to rearrange the stage, so please bear with us. We'll take a couple of minutes and then we're back. So, welcome back to our roundtable, and you know, as we're in a post-COVID scenario here, we have like a hybrid roundtable. So I will be joined here by Philippe Rixon, who we already met from our intro speeches before. And virtually we will be joined by Errol Uzer, who's the founder and president of the Blockchain Army. Then Jaka Mele, who's the CTO of CargoX, and Alexander Zidanšek, who's a professor at the Institute Josef Stefan. You should see them all on your screen. So thanks for being here, guys. Glad to have you. And I would really like to start, as we just heard a lot of really good and very interesting intro speeches about this important topic, to give maybe a quick intro about yourself, about what you're doing, why this is relevant to you, and how do you try to tackle it with projects and companies and research centers you're working on. Because I think it's very important to understand that there's many different angles to how to approach the SDGs. I mean, there's a number of them with a lot of indicators, and I think a lot of good ideas and smart people that are working on them. And I think it would be great if you could share your experiences. And for that reason, I would like to hand over to Philip now. Philip, you already outlined one of your key SDGs, so quality of education. When you look at that and all the issues that you outlined and how this can be achieved, how can you link those to other SDGs, and how do they have to be addressed together with education? Because, as you said yourself, it's a very important topic. It's the basis. So which entities we need to come on board? What kind of funding do we need? Do we need specific rules or regulations to address them? How would you tackle that if you would be in a position to make a decision on where to start?
Hello. Robert, thank you very much for those many questions. I need to pick one maybe to start. I would like to share an experience which is already 30 years old, which was to put extremely sophisticated knowledge in the hands of people who never went to school. The story was that I was working and developing a technical diagnostic system for a robot which was exchanging duffers in a spinning mill. In a spinning mill, that work was done previously by human. And the human, which did not have to go long at school to do that, were taking the full duffer, putting them aside and putting the empty one. A very manual, a very tedious work. The spinning mill decided to make robots, to place robots in front of the spinning machine. And you could think that it would mean that those laborers, those workers, would disappear. That was not the case. Those people then were using the robots. Those people had to maintain the robots, and those people had to diagnose any mistake which could happen with those robots. And already 30 years ago, we built an expert system to encapsulate the knowledge about the robots in the robots. As I told you, those people did not go to school. They were analphabet. They could not answer any question on a screen. They did not even have a keyboard. So we had to produce an interface so that tactily, they could deal with icons. They did not know it. They were using tremendous sophisticated knowledge. So artificial intelligence was capable to put in their hands sophisticated knowledge so that they could have and continue to have a decent work, which is another SDG.
Perfect. So Philip already, with his intro speech, outlined a very key SDG, and I know you've been working on solving or providing solutions for some of the others, and therefore I would like to give you the opportunity to elaborate a bit about the work you do and the focus points you have, and how do you see this on a more holistic, horizontal level. So over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much to all. I would like to repeat the same what the previous speakers already told. As blockchain has trust, openness, and transparency built into its designs through AI, and benefits are wide-ranging and impact possible for SDGs. So as Blockchain Army, we did few things also on that SDG goals. I would like to say the first one was the end poverty in all its forms and everywhere. It is, we can say that the cryptocurrencies and other blockchain-based tokens let the world's 2 billion strong unbanked population trade and transact. Mostly I'm talking to reach the African industry and economy. Initiatives are already beginning and to gain the traction, and blockchain solutions are disrupting the vast global remittances market and easing the burden of immigration. I can give two examples. Kenya is getting remittances for their GDP 84%. So this is the importance of the secure payment transactions. The secondly is very simple example for Turkey. Syrian immigrants, they are paid on the blockchain-based payments. Secondly, we are talking about the zero hunger, which is the SGD2. It is the ability is also, we are saying it is, you could tokenize the assets. Example, there is a in Sweden, you know, they did an undertaken to avoid bad eating habits in the child population, so they can trace the use of allocated funds to ensure that they are actually used for this purpose. So it means already it is an example for SGD2 is used in Sweden. Third one is SGD3. There are regional initiatives to share patient healthcare records more securely and efficiently. And the blockchain is putting the disease outbreak data onto a blockchain to improve the effectiveness of disaster relief and response, which is a good example for today's COVID-19. For SGD4, there is a scope for blockchain to improve the quality of education, which Philip already talked about in a wide range. I can say very simply, you can share exam scores, research data, and more across multiple institutions. By SGD7, which is affordable and non-polluted energy, applications are being created that allow traceability to be obtained on obtaining an origin of energy, as well as enabling CO2 footprint management generated by companies, allowing to implement bonus programs using tokens, which we can see some examples in Germany already. Which is decent work and economic growth, the flow of financing for disadvantaged sectors, as it has immutable guarantee of ethical behavior throughout the entire production chain, which is between Kenya and Germany. Germany is importing flowers from Kenya on the blockchain-based payments. SGD30 action. If you look, transparent digital ledger, which already mentioned by one of the previous speakers, is a type of database with an information shared, copied, and synchronized by different actors. So this is a big advantage, that the data is spread over an entire network without a central administrator managing the entitles or blocks. It is also impossible to manipulate data or information inserted, which we can talk also mostly in agriculture world on the, because the most biggest effectiveness of the climate change is coming on agriculture base. Small farmers could apply for crowdfunding or microcredit with a token, we can call it digital voucher. But at the same time, I must confess, there is also a disadvantage of blockchain because, example, what we are by the using blockchain in somehow by the tokenizing, we are increasing CO2 emission and it has environmental impact. So I would say on the climate action, we should also could follow on blockchain base, because when we are buying now a plane ticket, there is a program, they say plant a tree. We are paying a surcharge. We can see whether this surcharge is already used on these items or not. SDGs 12, 14, 15, responsible production and consumption, life below water, life on land. Blockchain can ensure good provenance throughout supply chains and has great potential to enable the circular economy. For example, we did already tracing yellowfin or skipjack tuna for a metro grocery store, which the value of the certification that you can find the ability, the source. SDG 16, for example, focuses on building peace, justice, and strong institutions. It is easy to imagine how the transparency and trust that are baked into blockchain could strengthen information sharing between institutions and the public. And perhaps in the future, it could re-engineer our democracy and governance through technology like voting, very important for the developing countries. And I would like to conclude my words that I can say today, just summarizing. SDG 1, what is used for the blockchain is cross-border payments, mobile money system, digital payment system. SDG 2, seed to customer platform, coffee value chain. SDG 3, mutual aid platform, health insurance, patients records, health records, DNA sequencing, data visualization engine, and donations platform. SDG 4, education platform, digital credentials. SDG 6, digital wallet, asset ownership, money transfer, community finance platform. SDG 8, records and references. SDG 9, 11, transport and logistics, data registries. SDG 16, network for journalism, public procurement. SDG 17, money transfer. So I could say blockchain could be a very good tool to help to, I would say, tackle SDGs to reach our goals. Thank you very much for listening to me.
And before I want to go to Jaka to discuss a specific use case, I would like to hand over to Alexander, who is doing some important research in this space, to complement and elaborate a bit about your work and how you see the potential of blockchain and AI for solving some of those SDGs. So please, over to you.
Thank you for your kind introduction. I would like to continue where my predecessors ended. So first, thank you for this invitation and congratulations to organizers and to my predecessors for very nice talks and a lot of important issues which I will not repeat. I would, however, like to focus on kind of a paradox, because on one hand we have artificial intelligence that is making our life easier, and on the other hand we have kind of lack of skills and competences that are making people more difficult to use all these technologies, including artificial intelligence and blockchain. Basically, what I wanted to say is that in order to use all these technologies, you need good education. And here I will just show briefly two showcases. One, how we do it with students, and one, how we do it with companies. And this is actually based on the work of our late founder, Professor Robert Blintz, who was professor of physics, and he had a great vision how to put together bright people, be the best in the world in research, be very focused on the students, and also work with the people that are using your work. So if we're talking about competencies, we're talking about those basic skills that are like European key competencies. It's been 15 years ago that they were defined. And here, of course, the digital competencies like one very important, which includes all this knowledge about artificial intelligence, about blockchain. And then you have STEM competencies, where you have also quantum technologies that are getting more and more important, and then soft skills, without which you cannot actually achieve much. So here, basically what we do first are the study programs of nano, ICT, sensor, and eco technologies, where for the blockchain, well, basically nanoscience has actually developed some basic science, basic knowledge, including material science and quantum communication, which is going to be important for the future blockchain. So this is a little bit more futuristic. However, the ICT is already the current state. Here there is a lot of computer security and systems where actually we provide mainly artificial intelligence knowledge, but also knowledge about security, blockchain protocols, and then of course eco technologies provide information about sustainable development goals and climate change and environment. So that was like the first part, where we say, let's give the students the best possible environment, interdisciplinary, a lot of smart people around them, and they're going to learn to be able to develop new tools, both in artificial intelligence, in blockchain, and also we believe that quantum technologies are coming, and they're going to be very important, in particular in blockchain, possibly also in artificial intelligence. The other idea is to go directly to companies, to people from users. For this purpose, we have a competence center where we actually develop like an expert system, which is based on simple artificial intelligence. And the blockchain is actually not yet implemented, but we plan that also, so that we measure the lack of each competence. So like here in this picture, you have like a couple of competences, like 7 typical competences of a manager. And the question is, how much does he need? How much does he have? Where is the lack? And how do we fill this gap in the most efficient way? Which training, what type of education for skills do they need to get this in the most efficient manner? So then you can follow this with an application. So here you measure like different competencies, different workplaces, different employees, different trainings, and then the time dependence of their skills, which shows you how each training is actually improving their skills. You know, this is basically a very general tool, and it can be used also for the skills from artificial intelligence, skills from blockchain, and other related skills that are necessary. As Marco said earlier, these skills are actually changing almost every week. You know, the changes are so fast that you need one skill today, but in a couple of weeks, you're going to need a different skill. And if you move farther in the future, nobody knows exactly which skills you're going to need. But what we know is that you're going to need very efficient and smart learning protocols, so that you will use your time in the most efficient manner. So that's basically what is our main idea. And here, of course, there are lots of good ideas, like if you go from proof of work to proof of stake, that will reduce environmental impact, you need less energy. I know HashGraph and the total hashnet from Tadej Slapnik are excellent examples. Then the United Nations, OECD were mentioned in the previous talks. So my conclusion for this brief introduction would be that blockchain provides excellent opportunity for distributed organizations and gives trust, which is actually required. We know if you look at Corona and a lot of those skeptics, trust is actually the most missing feeling in our society, and blockchain actually has great potential to improve this trust and to bring people back to trust each other. And that, of course, will also allow for faster and easier adaptation of new business models, reduce power of special interest, and this competence development actually allows people to grow faster together. And perhaps also go in the direction of blockchain-based direct democracy. So more information we have at this webpage, mps.si, and this was just my brief introduction. I will, of course, continue when there is good time. So my main conclusion is the education systems must improve, and we must focus on competencies and skills that are necessary for the today's society and also for the future society, where in addition to artificial intelligence and blockchain, we are also going to need quantum communication, quantum computing, and quantum technologies that are going to transform our lives even much more than these technologies in the last 40 years, which almost appear magically to somebody who lived 40 years ago. But in 10, 20 years, it will be even much more, we would say, really strange or weird, but if we really all together work together well, then it's going to be a much nicer world. It will be easier to tackle environmental problems, to reach sustainable development goals, and this is the world that we actually want to live in. Thank you.
Can you, yeah, thanks. Thank you, Alexander, for the great overview. And I think we heard now a lot about the potential of blockchain, what it can do, which sectors can be tackled, which problems can be tackled. And so I think we now, after hearing to all of you, we have quite a good idea of what can be done. And for that reason, I would like to go to Jaka, because he's actually already trying to implement some of those ideas and potentials and visions in his work. So Jaka, maybe you can elaborate a bit about what you're working on, how this impacts already the people you're working with, and where do you see the next step in your work?
Yeah, sure, happy to. Let me just share my screen. All right, so yes, not just trying to, but doing it for the last couple of years. So as a representative from the industry, I'm happy to say a few words about the CargoX. So I joined the company in 2017, and because I saw it as having one of the best use cases for the blockchain. Namely, we were trying to digitalize physical paper documents. And not only that, we tried that to do where it was impossible before. So where the requirement was a wet stamp and a blue ink signature. And especially we focused there where this document had to be usually shipped around the world for this or other reason. And since 2018, we have been giving our platform to users, and I'm happy to say we have quite a few users nowadays. I personally, I am in the blockchain area from 2012. It was only Bitcoin at that time, but it really got interested with the smart contracts a few years later. CargoX, we started focused on the maritime logistics, where one document stands out, and that is bill of lading. For those not familiar with this document, every time cargo is loaded on the ship, a document is given out, let's say, by the captain of the ship to whoever brought the cargo. And this same document is then required by the captain in the port of destination in order to give the cargo to the, whoever brings this paper. And this means that this paper has to physically be shipped around the world. And in essence, it's the same process more or less for the last several hundred of years. So we did first blockchain bill of lading, we call it Smart BL, in 2018 between China and Port of Koper in Slovenia. So following this success of the platform, we soon expanded to all trade documents. And the major thing we did here, we were building digital trust, right? So as Alexander said, trust is very important. And having a neutral platform that builds this digital trust between parties that do not know each other is, I would say, one of the major benefits of the blockchain. So if we just spend half a minute on this bill of lading documents, so we already said it has to be shipped around the world in a physical form. and that opens it to a lot of difficulties. So first, this express couriering is slow, expensive, but worst of all, documents can be lost or damaged along the way, and this opens then a whole bag of worms, a lot of problems, long problems, very expensive problems. So what we did with CargoX, we simply offered all the benefits that the blockchain offers, but we packed it in a way that it is very user friendly, intuitive. So user gets all the benefits of the blockchain without the complexity below. And this appeals to users because they are not, all of us, we are very, very against any changes, right? And this especially shows in latest technologies. And we wanted to target not only early adopters, but everyone. So the benefits of our system are many. I would say all of these here apply. I will not read them out, but most of all, the process is more efficient, and we are cutting out intermediaries wherever possible. This applies to a broader blockchain space. And with this, I would say we are also reaching, let's say, SDG 10, reduce inequality, although our focus is on SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So one of the questions we get asked quite a lot is why public blockchain? I must say we are a firm believer of public blockchain, as we really believe this is the only way a blockchain can give all the benefits. And it's really important for something as is global trade to have a public blockchain, because we know that world today is divided and fragmented more than ever, and only public blockchain and neutral platform as ours, where basically users are at all time in control and possession of their data, documents, and CargoX has no access to users' documents. So only such platform can bridge the trade wars, sanctions, and other political barriers. Of course, we started targeting with our platform companies in the logistics, like the carriers, the freight forwarders, but we soon found out that they're too busy to really take a next step to ease their work. So the next group that really appreciated our work and platform were shippers, so exporters and exporters, who actually are the one paying for all the costs involved in this to the carriers and freight forwarders. And at the same time, we also start educating governments and government agencies and on all the benefits of the blockchain, because this is really now for the first time ever a technology that can help them move away from the physical paper documents to something digital and keep all the trust. So the trust that the documents are authentic, and if needed, also the information about the ownership of the documents, which we obtain through tokenization. And I'm happy to say that at the beginning of this year, government of Egypt put in legislation an advanced cargo information program, which basically demands exporters to Egypt from all around the world to use the blockchain to submit the documents to customs. And CargoX was authorized as one of such providers, currently the only one, which will not hide it, has helped us tremendously. So we can see that only by having this approval by some authorities, by decision makers, the broad adoption of new technology can be achieved, or achieved at least much easier and faster. So as this legislation in Egypt helped, also it helped a lot that we were recognized by the leading or let's say major international insurance group. So international group of P&I clubs from London, they insure more than 90% of all sea freight. So more than 90%, right? And we are only one of 7 companies with such approval. Also, during the last years, we got a lot of awards. We are members of various industry standardization groups and bodies and so on. So this helps. So our roadmap, you can go through this in slides later. We have, like I said, a lot of very happy users. More or less, we have still on the platform all the users that ever registered. So each company that started using the CargoX to transfer documents is still using them. We did not lost one paying user, which is, I think, quite a lot. So going forward, we believe we made a sizable impact on the blockchain sphere and as innovation in industry in broad. And we believe there is no greater metric to see that impact or to measure the impact than the number of users that actively use the solution. And I'm happy to say that we have more than 35,000 companies on the platform who use our platform actively, and they come from all continents, from a lot of countries. And with that, I would say that, because we are bridging, digitizing what was once carrying of the physical paper documents, we are also reducing a lot of CO2 in this effort. So, and quite a lot of other benefits as well. So that would be from my side for now. I'll be happy to discuss later.
Thank you, Jaka, for this great elaborate outlook. Maybe a direct question to some of the things you just said, and in particular the first country you're working with is emerging country, emerging market, and you being European. Was this a choice, or was this rather like the appetite in emerging markets is bigger for those new technologies, or what's your sentiment on that? Is this something you see across Europe, or was this basically like a positive accident? Why did you end up in Egypt, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the fact is that we have been in contact with a lot of governments and a lot of governments authorities or customs around the world, also in Europe on the EU level. But what happened in Egypt is, so they were looking for the neutral provider, right? And we are neutral provider using public blockchain and be as open as possible, right? So we have open APIs, open everything. But what happened is in Egypt is that they are actually doing a very big digitalization project, and this advanced cargo information submission over blockchain for exporters is only a small part of it. So they are actually, at least as far as I know, one of the most advanced, or let's say they have the highest set target of any country that I know. And maybe that's easier in the, let's say, developing countries, because they don't have everything that the Western countries have put in place already in the last 50, 100 years, and it's then easier to make this big step forward. So we are very, very humble and very happy to be part of this great approach by the Egyptians.
Thanks for explaining that. A question to the rest of the panel. I mean, we discussed now a lot about sustainability and authenticity, and Philip outlined that very well and nice. When you look at those things, what needs to be done, for example, from an EU perspective to support that? Because sometimes it feels like we're waiting for the rules before we do something, and then industry is looking at it and saying like, look, we would like to do it, we love the innovation that you design and develop, but we're not sure if it's all safe and secure. And when it comes to financial inclusion or remittances, that's a big topic, for example, like what kind of regulation we need to have. But in other places, when we talk about credentials, for example, or like trade finance, as you outlined it right now, where are the big stumbling blocks? What needs to be done at EU level? How do you see that? And I'm asking that into the round. So if anybody wants to pick it up, then please.
engineer. A policy engineer is somebody who is checking if policies are rooted in reality. Of course, policymakers must simplify reality and must generalize a reality to be able to create policies. The other action of a policy engineer is to check if policies are feasible technically. And that's where the policy engineer stops. Policy engineers don't discuss policies. So this being said, when it comes to technicalities, how an AI system should function, that's a domain for engineers and developers. But when AI systems are touching ethical question or social question, that's a domain for policymakers, for sociologists, for anthropologists. This helped me to conclude that only interdisciplinary work between those different professions, policymakers, sociologists, anthropologists, engineers, developers, will lead to proper policies. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Anybody else who wants to comment on that? No?
Yes, maybe a few words from experience. So we have been discussing with many parties the use of our solution, and some of them, especially let's say traditional industries like banking, they have all the excuses in the world and some more. So it really helps when the government just decides and puts in law and says you have to do it. Then they will move, and not before. And yes, there are some exceptions always, right? But on general. So that's why we really approve and root for some new legislation, some new innovation targets by EU, and hope that other countries will follow as well. Because everything is happening very, very fast. And if the countries will not adopt that, they will stay behind. So it's just a fact. Thanks.
I think you made a very important point. So the speed of evolution of this whole sector is very fast and very difficult often for regulators to stay up to speed. Is there a way for researchers like you, Alexander, for example, or Philip, to support the Commission, for example, or also the member states that you're operating in to get a better understanding? I know that Slovenia is very advanced, for example, on this, but there's a lot of other countries where you would wish it would be faster, better, more open-minded, maybe sometimes even. What do you think we could do to educate about the technology and it brings, especially keeping in mind that we all agreed on those sustainable development goals and that we want to achieve them, and sometimes it seems difficult to basically align both of those wishes in one place. So, Alexander, maybe if you have any views on that.
Thank you. Really an excellent question. What I would suggest is the most important is that you have a stable environment. I mean, if the rules are changing like every few months, this is not good. So, and the other topic is, of course, also that the rules should allow people to use the technology. They should not be too restrictive. So, stable environment, not too restrictive rules. And I believe that also this communication with lawmakers, the European Commission, is extremely important. So, for example, we have regular communication with the European Commission, also within the Club of Rome and with other international organizations. So there is a lot of opportunity there, and still, I would say that the most important is stable environment. The rules should not change too much, and they should not be too restrictive, because the new technologies are coming, and if you do some restriction today, then very soon somebody is going to have this as an obstacle to the development. So really stable environment and open rules, that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Errol, you were outlining basically a number of solutions and use cases that you already seen, identified, or worked on. When you look at them, where do you think Europe is in a particularly good position and maybe take a leadership role? Where would you think we should still have to do some catch-up, and why?
In EU, there are some countries which are in the favor of use of blockchain, and also there are really persons which is trying to make blockchain use widely. But there are also a lot of lobbies which are against blockchain use. Example, you know, the banks are against, in many cases, of the financial use in the blockchain. That's one of the questions. And, you know, but I would like to say, you know, we are trying to live in a good life as it is in the SDG goals. And if you look to the during the era of COVID-19, many people stayed at home. Many people didn't work in their offices. They even used e-shopping. So blockchain was the most trustful and used also in the last 2 years. And because if you look really very carefully, the potential in 2025 for the blockchain technologies will be 176 billion, which in 2030 will be 3.1 trillion. Because my company is also a member of INATPA, which is under the Commission of Digital Economy and Digital Life. At that time, the ex-commissioner, Maria Gabriel, worked very hard with her team. As well, in the European Parliament, the Greek parliamentarian Eva Kaili worked very hard to move a lot of stages. So what I'm saying is it should be a consensus everywhere before we are talking the widely use of blockchain. Because example, Jaka really did a very big deal, because in the customs normally you use up to 72 documents when you are importing or exporting. So to bring everything in one touch button is saving the time. Also, you save time, use products if you are talking from food or any different type of tangible products. So I think the only cause, I would say, or controversially, we are talking from blockchain technology, which is decentralized, but the government are centralized. So this is I think, one of the problem when we put it on the table to discuss. So we should convince the governments to be more transparent. That's what I could say. Thank you.
Transparency probably leads to better government. Looking in the round, where do you think, looking at the SDGs, we will be like in 10, maybe 20 years with this technology? Do you think it will be a completely decentralized system for example, the use case that we just discussed, you know, like trade finance will be a decentralized network we will be all trading in? Or what needs to be done to achieve that? Because, you know, it seems like we're operating in a lot of silos, you know, like you have like what happens in Egypt, and there's probably a lot of other use cases where this is working already. What needs to be done, for example, that this is a fully connected world? Do we need to discuss standards? And should there be European, should there be global? What would be the next steps in your opinion? I don't know if anybody wants to specifically take the question, or if you want to just follow up, maybe, Errol, on what you just said.
May I just add something? We did a program with NASA under the name SOS, Save Our Space, which we try to follow all the obstacles in the space one by one and put on the blockchain to see that no more, I would say, garbage will be thrown from many different countries to the space. So that helped in the last 2 years, 64% decrease of the garbage in the space. So what I should say, I mean, some institutions are taking and using the advantage on that goals, because we have only one world. We have only plan A. We don't have plan B for the world. So therefore, I mean, this is very good that everybody, as we are doing now on this panel, everybody should share the experiences and find the common interest to do it well. We should talk, we should keep talking and lobbying with our governmental officials or the others, because the biggest example I can say is Malta. Their emeritus Prime Minister, Joseph Muscat, they did Malta a complete blockchainized country. And they are benefiting it very well in all senses, you know, in financial abilities, in export, mostly because they have not too much industry there, they are re-exporting a lot. This is very important that when we have an example, we should not be afraid and try to implement in our countries. We should be not we should leave our egos to reach the SDG goals. That I want to say.
Thanks, Errol. I see, Philip, you already picked up the microphone.
So to answer Robert's question about where are we in 10 years, my first part of the answer is that we will be in a world of hybrid solution anyway, centralized, decentralized, with blockchain, without blockchain, etc. So that's my first prognostic. But I would like to come back a little bit on history of artificial intelligence and prognostic. Already in the 1950s, people developing telephony were thinking about a system where I, Philip, here speaking in French in Slovenia, call my friend Yutaka in Tokyo, and he speaks only Japanese. And I speak French over the line, he speaks Japanese, and we understand each other. That idea was 1950s. When I started in 1985 with artificial intelligence, we thought we were close to that. Now, in 1985, we were nowhere about translating automatically written text. As you know now, we are really somewhere. When you look at the translator which are available for all of us, we can translate almost anything from anything, and this is available on the internet. Some of them with such an extraordinary quality that they are used to translate legislative text. Now, we have made that in the last 35 years. That's what it took to translate automatically text. It is a tremendous benefit for mankind. We are not yet in the situation where Philippe can call in French his colleague Yutaka, who speaks only Japanese. So you see that sometimes we do prognostic, we have ideas, we have concept, but some hurdles, technical hurdles, are on the way, and we would never have done automatic text translation without the current CPU power and without the current machine learning algorithm that we did not have 35 years ago.
Thanks, Philip. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. This is a really excellent insight. And I would just like to comment on this future. You know, if you look 10 years in the past or 40 years in the past, the world was completely different than it is today. So what we know is that this Moore law is obviously going to continue, which means that in about 10 to 20 years, the artificial intelligence solutions, which are today kind of starting to be useful in daily life, are going to be even more prevailing and are going to cover more of our daily lives, which means that there's going to be a need for a real interaction between these new artificial intelligence solutions, the blockchain, which would somehow also assure the trust in these solutions. You know, artificial intelligence can be either good or not so good. So you need some method of verification that the solutions are really going to do what you want them to do and not something else, especially if you are in self-driving cars or if you are in a situation where you're completely dependent on some software solution. So you really want to have the trust that this software is going to do something that is useful to you and not something that is destructive. So this is one point. And the other point is that I believe we are also seeing the advent of the quantum technology, especially communication and computing, which is going to affect also the blockchain solutions, which means that now is probably a good time to have in mind that the security against quantum communication and quantum computing, which is actually able to break the code, you know, the codes that cannot be broken by classical computers in billions or trillions or whatever of years. It can be done with quantum computers in a very short time. And that's something that is coming and can be expected in about a time frame of 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So we have actually a lot of dangers, but we also have a lot of opportunities because all these artificial intelligence solutions are going to make our lives much easier. And what we need from blockchain is to trust that these solutions are actually the right one, that they are useful to us. And we also need to be prepared for the advances of quantum communication and quantum computing. So this is my short view of the near future. Thank you.
I mean, we discussed how important education is already a bit, and also that we need, you know, like proper frameworks from our legislators. But how about the issue or the topic of talent? When you look at, for example, your talent pool, Jaka or Errol, is this something you're looking optimistic into the future, or do you see like a lot of gaps there? Is there enough talent to actually pull this off, what we've been discussing and having visions for?
Sure, I can try to answer that. So for our specific use case, basically the smart contracts needed on the blockchain are really, I would say, a minor part of our solution. We found out that we had to do a lot more work on the user interface, on the ease of use, and educating, on the support, on persuading, you know, and educating government and so on. So I would say it really involves a multi-talent, not only a specific, you know, IT/blockchain developer knowledge, which is of course scarce, especially on some senior level. But still, I think that, you know, because at least covering the public blockchain, I think it's so much of these public bits of code are available, then it should not be a problem going forward, right? Because it is an open community. It's open source. A lot of it's open source, even the smart contracts. So, and especially the audited smart contracts, right? Because security part is very important, because once you put trust in a smart contract, right? Smart contract equals law in this blockchain space. So you have to be sure that it works what it should work and not something else.
Errol, do you want to comment as well?
You know, I've nothing to say. I would like to just mention, if you allow me, a chat which is sent to us, to all of us, by Mr. Figula. He said, a good example is an EU-wide durable medium regulation that was rigorously executed by the regulator over Polish banks. After this push, the banks spent time and energy to design and implement a blockchain-based solution. The government has huge capability to drive such innovation. So that I think this type of panels, we start just to start the first step for a long journey. That's what I could say.
You made an important point there.
I would agree with that. And, you know, especially I would say it's so much important for this push to come from EU level, right? Because local regulators are a lot of time afraid of their own shadow. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to put, you know, stick their heads out because they're afraid it will get chopped. And maybe it has in the past, I don't know. But, you know, so we should, as an industry, as the academia, we should really push institutions to go forward and not look back. You know, I'm really sad because I was reading a couple of days ago the new proposal for the blockchain regulation in the USA, which, you know, was clearly written by the guys coming from the banking sector, Wall Street, and with the, you know, essentially kill or, you know, stop or prohibit all the innovation in the, at least in the this money part of the blockchain, right? Remittance, everything else, smart contracts and so on, decentralized banking, everything. So we should really not this path. We should actively say that we want better than it is today, because it's clearly that the world as it is today has a lot of problems and it won't last, you know, with the same mentality and the same things. Thanks.
Regarding education, this is really a very important topic, which is crucial for our future, because the people that are now in the education system are going to be the leaders in the near future. So I believe that we need to tackle really all levels of education, from primary school to lifelong learning, high school, university, and they have a lot of opportunity for improvement. And this improvement can actually also originate from all these technologies that are available today, like artificial intelligence, better communication, which means that today actually young people have better opportunities for education than were ever in the history of humankind. And we just need to make sure that these are really used for the good, which means that sustainable development goals are tackled, that people are learning digital skills, they know how to use blockchain, they know how to do artificial intelligence, and also quantum technologies and all the other technologies that are actually appearing. You know, it's almost that we are limited by human imagination, which means that we have to design good systems so that education becomes better, and that better education will actually bring us better people and better results and better future. Thank you.
I think all that you mentioned right now points to a question, at least for me, logically, that I want to ask. Is like, do you think because there seems to be a big discrepancy between, you know, what can be done, what the industry is doing, and what is understood, and sometimes even feared. Would there be need maybe for some kind of sandbox environment, which we combine with, for example, directly with the SDGs, or even create together with the United Nations maybe? Do you think that would be something that would be helpful if that would be driven at the EU level? Or is this something that is basically like just a distraction from really needs to be done? Because a lot of times, and my background is finance, we always try to look at it and test it in sandbox environments. You know, there's a lot of them all over Europe and across the world. Is this something maybe we should do as well, you know, to showcase the benefits of AI and public blockchains, for example, and how they benefit citizens without having to say, like, look, you have to give up full control and everything, but you rather get more transparency and more trust?
Well, I believe a lot of initiatives like this would be useful, and then the best initiatives will actually prevail. So it's better to have more different smaller initiatives so that they can kind of compete to each other, and then the best would prevail, and they will bring us forward. So the more small initiatives, the better chances that you get some great breakthrough. Thank you.
Views. No fans of sandboxes here. Okay, good. Then I ask a different question then. If we would want to identify, and we touched on that a bit already, like 3 or 5 use cases that we want to make flagship initiatives at European level. You know, I mean, we're here at the European Blockchain Week of the European Commission and of the EU presidency. So I think it's the perfect place to, you know, come up with a wish list. If you have one, which sectors do you think Europe should prioritize because we're in the best position to do, and how could we do that? And I think that would be a nice, looking at the time, was a nice ending round. So please, waiting for your wish lists, guys. You want to start, Philip?
Well, we can, of course. To honestly answer that question, we need all to sell our own wine, right? So I'm personally dealing with copyright. And of course, I have to believe, that should be very high in the priority of countries of the European Union and of the United Nations through WIPO. We have shown that the use of artificial intelligence and blockchain can help the creators and the innovators, which are potentially the seed of solving some of the sustainable development goals. And that is surely something where at those 3 levels, countries, Europe, and WIPO, in this case, United Nations, we can do something. I'm also convinced that we need to show very practical, tangible benefit for the users of the system to convince anybody to use those systems. Anybody means, of course, the users, but also the policymakers. So let's do our job and communicate with anybody else so that they do their job.
Thanks, Philip. Maybe just a quick follow-up question, because that was flagged yesterday as well already on another panel. What role should public institutions play? Because, you know, we always expect, you know, the support of the private sector, and the innovation is coming from there, which is most of the cases it's true, but which role should the public institutions play in this space? How important are they?
That's a very interesting question, and I can only share what I learned from a country where now I'm deeply involved in working, which is Estonia. In Estonia, the public sector defined their role at 3 levels. The first level is the state as honest broker. So if you want the state doing its job, what it's meant to be doing. The second level is the state as a change agent. So they don't do the job as last week or last month, but they trigger a change in what they do and in their relationship with citizens' organization. And the third level is the state as legislator. And very often we are focused on the state as legislator, expecting policies, forgetting that the state can act already as an honest broker and a change agent without enacting new laws. Now, another thing which is crucially important in the collaboration in Estonia is the work between the public and the private sector. So you see here another dimension. So dimension 1, honest broker, change agent, legislator, but this being done in collaboration between private and public sector. So that's what I learned from them and practice, I think, with some success.
if you could have a wish list, I mean, we're the, as I said, your president's this event and the commission is here and listening in. Which SDGs would you prioritize, and what would be the role of the public sector in supporting the work on those priorities?
Okay, I'll go next. So for me personally, I would say, of course, SDG 9, industry innovation, and I think the public sector should play a big role here. But it should start at the very top on the EU level to put forward a new legislation, making digital, defining first a digital original document, what it is. Obviously, public blockchain can offer answer here. And then make sure that everybody can equally accept either digital original document via blockchain or, still the legacy kind of documents, at least for some period of time. I think this would remove the big uncertainty that a lot of companies have right now. And if the public sector would be the driver of these digital original documents, then I think everybody else would move as well. And I think the Slovenia was a nice example of that when the e-invoice was introduced a few years ago. And, after some time, the public sector was only accepting the e-invoices, right? Not the paper invoices anymore. So a lot of the industry had to move. So I think on the EU level, if something similar would happen, that would be quite a good pointer to the right direction that would, bring along all the other SDGs as well, and show the, and be, of course, the example for the rest of the world. Yeah, and I wish that EU would really, start looking left and right and just do something and be the first and be the leader, because it's time.
Thanks for this very concrete one. Errol or Alexander, do you have anything to add or any specific things to flag?
Just one. Okay, please, Alexander.
Thank you. I believe that it's time that European Union actually strengthens the efforts in education, so that, for example, there are lots of institutional barriers, so like recognition of education from one country to another, like micro credits for education, like recognition of lifelong learning education, education for people who are already like working and are gaining new knowledge. There is European framework of competencies, and it's kind of 15 years old, and it's not really adjusted to the current reality. So I believe that this systematic monitoring and improvement and development of competencies at EU level, in particular for people who are working in this ICT type modern industries, but also in all levels of education, should be improved and tackled at European level. Thank you.
I would like to add just one thing. I want to make a focus. Our panel is blockchain for SGD. So on the 17th is partnership for the goals. So my wish list is 17 because it will cover all SGDs in one point. If the EU countries all make a partnership for the goals, and if they implement the system, then I think I would say the academician, the companies, they will do to implement the system.
Thanks for that final statement. I think that sums it up pretty well. I think we need better communication in the end, and an open mind and open ears to, I think, put forward and deal with the visions that come out of the private industry and out of the research and education space. There's a lot of talent in Europe and a lot of great ideas, great minds. And I think to achieve those SDGs, ideally starting with number 17, as we just heard. I think we just need to step up our game, both the private and the public sector, to talk to each other more and take more time and try to understand and be patient as well, because sometimes, you know, it takes time to get understood. On that note, I would encourage everybody, also in the audience, to, you know, speak to everybody that you see that is interested. Try to excite them about the topic, showcase what's the potential of it, because I think there's huge potential, and as Europe, we're in a position where we can lead on all of that. And on that note, I want to thank my panel. Thanks for being here. Thanks for dialing in. I hope the audience also enjoyed, and enjoy the short break till we head over to panel number 6. Thank you, guys.